Hey everyone, I'm Tom. Okay, so you've decided to go camping. You know you need food, you need your tent, and depending on where you're going, you probably need several gallons of water. But as you probably also know, sleeping in the great outdoors is very different than sleeping in the great indoors. You could certainly toss a sleeping bag in your tent, you could call it good, but you might want, or you might even need, a little bit more. So in this video, we're gonna talk through some of our tips and our tricks to help you get some of your best night of sleep while you're camping. Because look, the last thing you need is to be sleep deprived and cranky in the woods. Okay, the first thing to think about is not just your tent, but your tent placement. You wanna make sure you're on as level of a surface as possible. You don't want blood rushing to your head because you're sleeping on a slope. Then of course, clear the space of any debris or sticks and make sure there are no rocks. Not only is that quite uncomfortable, it could actually rip through the bottom of your tent. And you might also think about putting down a tarp underneath your tent. That's gonna keep any moisture or rain from seeping through the bottom. Now the next thing you'll need is a sleeping pad of some kind. Now these do two things. First, it gives you some cushion, obviously, so you're not sleeping on that really hard ground. Now the other thing that they do, secondly, is provide some insulation. I know this from experience, but sleeping without a pad, your body heat just leaves your body and goes into the ground. You wake up freezing. Camping pads come in all shapes and sizes, so you might consider one that's a little bit wider, that gives you space to move or shift around on the pad itself. Of course, some are quite narrow, and that's fine if you sleep like a mummy and don't move, but we recommend a wider sleeping pad. Now, if you're car camping and you have the space, I'd say forget the pad. Just bring along a cot. Okay, when you think of camping, you think about sleeping bags, which are super important, and you have a few things to consider here. First, if you're driving out to your camp spot, not hiking out, you can get away with a bag that's cut a little wider. Now, the upside of these is that they're quite roomy. The downside, though, is they're not often rated for colder nights. On the other hand, those of you who are backpacking, you can look for one that's specifically designed for a backpack trip. These are gonna have a closer fit, they're gonna be a lot warmer, and the upside is they're gonna be super lightweight, which means they'll be easier to pack, and most importantly, easier to carry. The other thing to consider is how warm the bag is going to keep you. You might see on a bag something called an ISO or an EN rating. That means it's been tested in a lab under lab-like conditions to a very certain temperature. Of course, take those temperature numbers loosely. How you use it in the wild might vary, but it's a good number to kind of indicate how warm the bag should keep you. Speaking of staying warm, aside from, just being comfortable in your tent, staying warm is the biggest thing to consider. You obviously can't regulate the temperature in your tent like you can in your house, and the nights in the woods are much colder than we think. So be prepared. I always tell my kids, you can take layers off, but you can't put them on if you don't have them. So again, if you're driving to your campsite, consider packing an extra blanket or two. And then when you actually go to bed at night, make sure your clothes are dry, that they're not sweaty or damp. And then a couple of final points that we like to recommend. Again, if you're car camping, bring along a pillow that you sleep with. You're already gonna be out of your sleeping habits and your familiar routine, so bringing along one comfort from your bed at home is kind of nice. Just make sure that you wash it when you get home. And of course, you can also bring along an inflatable pillow too, which is easy to pack, very easy to carry. Okay, you've got your tent, you got your pillow, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, or in our case, we got our cot. These are the basics. But how do you level up your sleep so that it's the best you can get outside? Well, it's actually in some of the little things. So first of all, pack a light. The nights outside are much, much darker when you're camping, actually surprisingly so. And a light or some kind of lantern in your tent is gonna come in handy. Now, speaking of light, sunrise is also much earlier than many of us think, so pack an eye mask to keep out some of that early morning light. And then of course, bring along some earplugs or maybe even a small white noise machine. If you happen to be a very light sleeper, this is gonna dampen some of the sounds of nature and help you sleep just a little bit better. And finally, keep all of your food and your scented items outside of your tent. If you're backpacking, you'll need something like a bear canister. If you're car camping, just make sure you have all that stuff put away in your car. The last thing you want at night is bears or raccoons waking you up because they're rummaging through your camp. Well, camping is a great way to unplug from certainly the chaos of your daily life, the hustle and bustle of the city, and by the way, it's a great way to actually reset your circadian rhythm too, which is a nice side effect. So stick to some of the tips in this video and we promise you'll get a pretty solid night of sleep in the woods. Thanks for watching, everyone. Sleep well.